And the topic is very, very exciting: social entrepreneurship and leading social innovation and organization. Very rare topic, and in fact, so much so that there's a course around the same title, around this. I won't say similar, but they're around the similar title at Harvard, the Stanford Business School as well, Graduate School of Business. And before I hand over the platform and the forum to Anshul, let me have the pleasure of welcoming Anshul, who is joining us from Singapore, which is, right now around 9 p.m. there in Singapore. And if you look at her career, it's a very, very illustrious, and I'm sure those of you are interested in this space, I think you should seek out a lot of advice after the session from her illustrious career. Currently, she is the co-founder of at a Social Innovation Circle. And she also the co-founder and partner at Social Innovation Circle, a leading coaching platform for social innovators looking to unlock new sources of funding. She has advised several social entrepreneurs on fundraising initiatives and have helped raise impact funding in sectors including healthcare, climate change, education, and digital literacy. And she also serves on the boards of various social enterprises in Asia. Prior to founding a Social Innovation Circle, she was a senior consultant for social finance at Ashoka, the world's largest network of leading social entrepreneurs. She frequently writes about social innovation and the power of finance as a catalyst for change. And she also enjoys writing short stories about the fascinating journeys of social innovators who are driving change. She calls these stories espresso shorts, short stories that squeeze out moments of inspiration and motivation. That's her current role. And like I said, from her very, very last years, maybe, and one of you might like to ask as to what made her to change her from very, very thriving corporate career to a social sector. And she completed her PhDM, that is your MBA, from IIM Ahmedabad between 2004 and 2006. And immediately after her IIM Ahmedabad stint, she joined Merrill Lynch, one of the most sought after Wall Street firms, as equity derivatives as structured solution group between April 2006 and October 2008. That's about 2 years and 7 months. And immediately after that, she also started working at Standard Chartered in the equity derivatives division between 2009 April and July 2010. After which she had the pleasure of working at DBS Bank, the world's most renowned digital bank right now, in the strategic client coverage group for 2 years and 2 months. And after that, she got into the social sector. And currently, she is the senior advisor, social finance at Ashoka Chelwood Capital in Singapore, and where she has been in this role for the last 7 years and continuing even now. And she is also a member of the board of advisors at Another India, where she is working in this capacity from September 2000. And she's also the member of board of directors at Karma Primary Healthcare eDoctor from May 2021 and continuing. As you can see, she wears various hats and very, very eloquently, and most importantly, the kind of change that he and her team is able to bring to the table, as well as the social innovation is concerned. And once again, welcome to you, Anshul. I look forward to having a very enriching discussion in this very interesting space. Over to you, Anshul.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Nagendra. It's such a pleasure to be here. And thank you for such a detailed and amazing introduction. And yeah, it's just great to be with all of you. And thank you, everyone, for joining. And I hope this session is interesting for all of you, and it throws some ideas as you kind of begin to think about how you can lead social entrepreneurship in your own organizations. So I won't go in and introduce myself again, because Dr. Nagendra has done that very eloquently. So maybe we'll just get started, right? So I'm going to share my screen as I prepared a presentation, and I'm just going to do that right away. Please do let me know once you see my screen.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, wonderful. So yeah, that's me, and I'm the co-founder and partner at Social Innovation Circle, which is a leading platform for funding and coaching social enterprises on how to raise investment. So that's a very brief introduction. So what we are going to be talking about today, as you're aware, the topic for today's session is social entrepreneurship, right? And what we will talk about is how those who are a part of organizations or corporates can lead social innovation and contribute to social change. So for all of you who have a lot of ideas and who want to create meaningful change, I hope this session will give you some thoughts on how you can start that journey. So the agenda for the session is as follows. This is what we'll be going through in the next hour. We will begin with talking about what is social entrepreneurship and how is it different from social entrepreneurship, something that you would have all heard about. Next, we will talk about why social entrepreneurship is important for companies, and why in today's time and age, it's important for companies to start thinking about social entrepreneurship, about how they can contribute to the social ecosystem, and why is it important for them to be socially responsible. And then we will shift the spotlight to you, right? How you, as part of corporates and organizations, can drive social innovations in your companies. What kind of hurdles may come your way because you're part of larger organizations, and how can you traverse through all those obstacles and gain internal support as you launch these initiatives within your company. And then last but not the least, what we will talk about is how and why should corporates collaborate with the social sector? Or in other words, how can social entrepreneurship come together with social entrepreneurship to create large-scale impact? So let's get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is what is social entrepreneurship? That's the topic for the day. And how is it different from social entrepreneurship? And at any point as we go through this presentation, if you have any questions, if you want to share anything, please just feel free to raise your virtual hand and I will bring you in. So when we talk about social entrepreneurship, what I want to first begin with is to really touch upon who is a social entrepreneur first, right? So a social entrepreneur is an individual with innovative solutions to society's most pressing social, cultural, and environmental problems. So it's an individual who's coming up with the most innovative solutions that we are seeing in today's times towards the social problems that we see in the world today, right? The social, cultural, or environmental problems that we see in the world today. And I'm going to give you a few examples. But let me just ask you, does anyone know who this gentleman is? I'm sure you do, but I would love to know but please feel free to put it down on the chat, or if you just want to speak up. Does anyone know who this gentleman is? Okay, there's something in the chat, but all right. Okay, no worries. I'm going to just put it down. Okay, this is Professor Muhammad Yunus, who is founder of Grameen Bank, a Nobel Award winner. And he's the father of the microfinance movement. And he is a leading example of a social entrepreneur. And if I remember reading his book, which is very, very inspiring. And if you're really interested in knowing about the whole microfinance movement, I would urge you to do that as well. It's called Banker to the Poor. And that's where he talks about how he started what led him to start the entire microfinance movement and the launch of the Grameen Bank. So there's a very interesting story, which I'll just share with you. So back in 1976, Professor Yunus was traveling in the villages of Bangladesh, where he's from, and he came across three women basket weavers. And these were women from very poor families, and they were weaving baskets to just sell those and, make some money to just maintain their livelihood. And he had a chat with them just to understand how they were managing to run this kind of a micro business, if you can call it that. And what the ladies told him was that it was really difficult because they needed money to be able to run this, but banks were not willing to lend any money to them, right? And the reason why banks did not want to give any money to them was because they considered these women absolutely credit unworthy, right? Because they came from very poor backgrounds. And so for any lending, they wanted them to post collateral, some sort of security or assets, which of course these women didn't have. So then these women were completely left out of the banking system because they could not avail any sort of lending from the banks. And so they had to resort to going to money lenders who were charging exorbitant rates of interest. And as a result of that, these women were constantly stuck in a debt spiral, right? They had to raise these loans and they were perpetually paying the interest on these loans. And because of that, they were caught in that debt spiral and they could never emerge out of poverty. So Professor Yunus decided to test a hypothesis, right? He had a hypothesis and he decided to test it. And he gave them $27 out of his own pocket. And he said, okay, I'm giving it to you as a loan and let's just see what you do with it, right? So he thought, okay, if it comes back, great. But if it doesn't, it would just be a grant or a donation. And to his surprise, each one of those women actually returned the money in full. And not only that, they made a profit on it as well. And so at that point, a light bulb went inside his head. It was like an aha moment for him where he realized, no, the banks are wrong. These women are creditworthy, but what they need smaller loans without the need for posting collateral, right? And that's when he founded Grameen Bank, a bank for the poor, which could lend to such people who were wanting to start these small businesses, but wanted very small loans at low rates of interest and without the need for posting any sort of collateral. So that is the story behind how this started. And of course, he won a Nobel Prize for this. And we all know how microfinance has really taken off after that. One more example, which is of Simon Berry, an Ashoka Fellow. And Professor Yunus is also an Ashoka Fellow, the organization that I've been a part of. So Simon Berry is the founder of Cola Life. And so Simon Berry, the problem that he was focused on was he was living in Zambia back in the 90s. And the social problem that he was focused on, or he saw over there, was that every year, diarrhea was killing hundreds and thousands of children in sub-Saharan Africa. In fact, it was the #1 killer for children below the age of 5. And the solution was very simple. And you all would have heard about these, and you would all know about these oral rehydration salts, right? So the solution was very simple. It was just a sachet of those oral rehydration salts, which also cost very less than 10 cents. But the problem was that these salts were not reaching these people in these far-flung villages. The salts were available in towns and cities, but they were not reaching these villages. So it was quite a shock for Simon Berry to see that. But what was even more shocking for him was the fact that what was instead reaching these people was a can of Coca-Cola, right? So Coca-Cola can or a bottle was actually able to reach these people in these far-flung areas. So again, a aha moment or a light bulb moment for him. And he thought, okay, so then why can't we just use Coca-Cola's distribution network? Why can't we just tap into their distribution network and send those sachets wherever those crates went, right? So he came up with this solution, which was the Cola Pod Yamoy, which was basically those ORS sachets, the oral rehydration salt sachets. And they were designed in a way to fit into the unused spaces in the cola crates, right? So now wherever these crates went, these sachets went. And because of that, hundreds and thousands of lives have been saved. So this is the essence of social entrepreneurship, the characteristics of a social entrepreneur. They are very innovative. They come up with new solutions towards the social problems. And when I say innovative, it can be innovation in any part of the value chain, right? It need not be just innovation in products or innovation in just services, but it can be innovation on the supply side of the value chain. It can be an innovation in the distribution side of the value chain. I mean, as in the case of Professor Yunus, he came up with an absolutely new product or service, microfinance, right? Small loans without collateral. In the case of Simon Berry, it was in the distribution. The product wasn't new. It was still the oral rehydration salts. But the innovation was in tapping into Coca-Cola's distribution network. So it's an innovative solution. Of course, it's geared towards social impact. That's why they launched these organizations with a mission to create social impact. And it creates systemic change, which means that it changes the systems in which they are operating in. It changes the way the sector looked prior to their intervention. So in the case of Muhammad Yunus, it was an absolutely new way of lending to the poor that nobody had done in the past. So a systemic change on how to lend to the poor, because prior to that, the only people who were lending to the poor were those money lenders at exorbitantly high rates of interest. And in the case of Simon Berry, it was this access to the last mile, access to people who are living in far-flung areas in the last mile, right? And so he figured out a way of how these OTC life-saving medications, which were until then unavailable to the people living in these villages, how to make them accessible. So this is the systemic change these entrepreneurs came about. Now let's shift gears to understanding who is a social intrapreneur, right? And the definition goes, an individual within a corporate that takes direct initiative and utilizes the business's existing networks and infrastructure to impact society while also creating commercial value for the company. And just notice the 3 points that I've highlighted over here and focused over here, because that is basically the characteristics of a social intrapreneur. So it's an individual who is within a company, as against a social entrepreneur who launches a company, right? Whether it is an NGO or a for-profit or whatever, but they launch their own company. A social intrapreneur is an individual within a company. They're both innovative. They're both coming up with innovative ideas and solutions. They're both wanting to create social change. But the key difference, or one of the key differences, is that a social entrepreneur comes up with an idea that also contributes positively to the business. So there is commercial value. So that when that idea is introduced in a corporate or an organization, it is done with 2 aspects in mind. One, to create social change, but the other, and very importantly, to also create commercial value within the organization. Right. So let me give you a very quick example of a social intrapreneurship project. So this is a brand that you all are aware of, and it's Lifebuoy, which is a part of Unilever. And it was one of the chief architects behind the launch of the Global Hand Washing Day, which is now celebrated on October 15 every year. And Dr. Miriam Sidibe, who was Lifebuoy's global mission, social mission director, was the social intrapreneur who led this within Unilever, right? And it's very interesting because she holds a PhD in hand washing. And she's probably one of the only, I think, 2 people in the world who has a PhD in hand washing, right? And it's because of this knowledge that she has and this deep understanding of the problem. She had this deep understanding of the benefits of hand washing that she wanted to target this social problem, right? And the social problem that she wanted to focus on was that every 30 seconds, there's a child that dies from pneumonia or diarrhea. The practice of hand washing with soap is the single most cost-effective intervention. And if it is widely practiced, approximately 230,000 deaths could be averted every year, right? And so she launched the Global Hand Washing Initiative, which was done then in collaboration with the likes of UNICEF, World Bank, USAID, and others. And it recognized the need to raise awareness of hand washing with soap as a simple but a life-saving habit that could prevent diseases. So going back to the characteristics of social entrepreneurship that I shared earlier. So this initiative was led by an employee of Unilever. It's an entrepreneur, Dr. Miriam. And it tackled a social problem that demonstrated high impact. So in terms of social impact, this particular campaign, just from Lifebuoy's end, it reached 1 billion people across 30 plus countries, making this the largest behavior change program in the world, right? So till date, it has reached more than 30 countries and more than 1 billion people. And the third and very important characteristic that I talked about, which is impact on business. So needless to say, Lifebuoy's sales shot up, right, leading to increased revenues and growth, because the more the campaign spread, the more people understood the value of hand washing, the more the sales of Lifebuoy went up, right? So that is the business angle to this. So you do social good, but you do it with a business angle in mind. And of course, it brought reputation, had good reputation. It brought goodwill to the company, to be seen as an ambassador of good hand washing practices, and being socially responsible or being seen as socially responsible is always favored by your clients, your customers, and your employees. So definitely a lot of business impact in addition to the social impact. And in the words of Dr. Miriam Sidibe, she said, it is not only the right thing to do, socially, or from, when you look at people all over the world, but it's also the right thing for our business. So that is basically the essence of social entrepreneurship. It's an individual who takes initiative, who has an idea within an organization, and the idea is to create social good, but also add value to the business. So that is social entrepreneurship, and that is what differentiates it from social entrepreneurship. So I'm just going to quickly pause over here before we move to the next section, just to see if anyone has any thoughts or questions, or if they want to just add any points to this. Maybe just a half a minute pause here.
If you have any questions, so please do put that in the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand. Yes, Abhishek, you have a question. You would like to ask, or you would like to put it there? Go ahead, Abhishek. Can you unmute Abhishek Murli? Yeah, Abhishek, I think I heard his question, Anshul, is can we say it is a CSR activity?
Well, this is different from CSR because CSR, so the angle again is, and I'm going to get to that actually in the next section, but the difference here is again in the business value part of this, because CSR is usually money that is given for certain social activities. It need not contribute to anything commercial in the organization, whereas social entrepreneurship is really coming up with very innovative ideas which further a social goal, but also contribute to the business. So that is one of the key differences. Another difference that I can point out is that when a company adopts a social, entrepreneurial initiative, obviously it puts down its resources, and it also is a risky activity because you're launching something new. So it is more risk taking from that perspective, whereas CSR is more in a way it's risk management, right? Because of course you're a business, but you also want to be seen as doing good. So it's more of risk management. But social entrepreneurship is obviously when you take risks because you're launching something new in the market. Is that clear? Okay, great. All right. So maybe we can move on to the next section. And this section is, why is social entrepreneurship important for companies? So now that we know what social entrepreneurship is all about, let's talk about why it's important for companies to encourage it, right? So the future of business is not profits only. The future of business is actually profits plus purpose plus practice. And all businesses need to be socially aware and socially responsible. They need to build purpose into their practice, and they need to be seen as organizations that are contributing to the society, right? And failing to do so can really threaten their survival in the long run. This is where the world is and where it's going. And the entire definition of what we call, business as usual now, business for social good in the future will become that definition for business as usual. So business for social good will be what we consider business as usual. And social entrepreneurship, or projects that generate revenue while maintaining positive social impact, are an important step in this transition, right? And so this is where social entrepreneurship really comes in. And that is the beauty of social entrepreneurship, that while it creates social good, it is also good for the business, right? So while it helps companies contribute to the social ecosystem and create change, it also makes economic and business sense for them. So looking at it from purely a perspective of benefits to the company, there are various tangible and intangible benefits that a company has when it pursues social entrepreneurship or social innovation within the organization. So the tangible benefits, definitely, it drives business growth. Of course, you have to get it right when you launch it. It drives business growth. It contributes to revenues and cost reductions, depending on whatever the initiative is. It could help launch new products and services. It could enable expansion and international rollouts. And it also helps in retention of talent, because an environment where you allow your employees to ideate, where you allow your employees to innovate and lead initiatives, it's always very motivating for employees, right? So it helps in retaining top talent. And of course, there are a lot of intangible benefits of this as well. For one, it sparks innovation, right? So social entrepreneurship, it creates an environment that supports innovation, right? And innovation is fundamental. It's fundamental to growth. And there is no company in today's time that can ignore innovation, right? Because that can lead to a loss of competitiveness, it leads to a loss of opportunities. So it's very important to create an environment that promotes innovation, and social entrepreneurship is one way of doing that. And of course, as we discussed, it gives positive reputation, it creates a socially responsible image. And of course, being socially responsible is always favored by employees as well as by customers. And I am just going to take you through a few more examples to drive in this point. So first is the case of Allianz, which we all know. It's a multinational financial services company. And in 2004, an employee of Allianz, Michael Anthony, he pioneered the microinsurance business of the company. So till then, they were just doing insurance, but they were doing it for those who could afford it. And it was in 2004 that they pioneered microinsurance, which was basically insurance for those who could not afford it, for the poorer sections of the society, right? And it basically started, this idea came about when the tsunami hit the Indian Ocean in 2004, which made Michael realize that the poorest people are the ones who have no access to insurance, and they are the ones who are the most hit by such kind of natural catastrophes. So he thought about how this could be addressed, right? How could insurance cover this larger section of people who were literally at the lowest segment of the economic pyramid, right? And that is how Allianz Microinsurance was born, with the objective of providing insurance to these people who were living at the bottom of the pyramid. So, of course, in terms of the social angle, it's quite obvious, providing microinsurance to millions who were previously uninsured. But also from a business perspective, it created millions of new customers for them, right? It created business growth. It increased their revenues. It increased market penetration. They were able to offer these services to various, more developing countries. So it led to business expansion. So again, a business angle together with a social angle. Another example, our favorite jeans, Levi's. So in 2010, Levi's introduced waterless jeans. And the idea behind waterless jeans was that it drastically cut down the amount of water that is used in the finishing process or when the jeans are made, right? And they came up with very powerful ads for the same, as you can see, that for you, it's the same great Levi's jeans. For 17,000 people, it's a year's worth of clean drinking water, right? And things like, an average pair of jeans uses 42 liters. We are using less than 1 liter, right? So as you can see, a lot of strong social messaging over here. So far, we've saved 3.5 billion liters of water. We have recycled 5 billion liters of water. So clearly a social angle. But from a business perspective, this also meant that they were consuming 96% lesser water, which meant lower costs, right? And lower costs means increased margins. So again, a business angle to it. And one last example, just to kind of stress upon this a bit more. So in 2007, Kenya's largest mobile network operator, Safaricom, which was a part of the Vodafone group, it launched M-Pesa. And M-Pesa was an innovative payment service for the unbanked. So people who didn't have any banking accounts and who were traditionally left out of the banking system. And the concept was very simple. So as long as you had a mobile phone, you could easily and quickly transfer money, and very securely, of course, transfer money across great distances directly to another mobile phone user, right? And you didn't need to have a banking account at all. All you needed to have was a M-Pesa account with Safaricom. And so this idea, this mobile transfer system was very revolutionary, and it was the brainchild of course, two entrepreneurs who were working with Safaricom, Susie Loney and Nick Hughes. And it really has, like, obviously it's just altered the way developing economies started thinking about creating banking systems for those who were previously unbanked. So in terms of social impact, of course, again, it provided access to financial services for millions. Just in Kenya, when these guys launched, only 25% of Kenyans had access to any sort of formal financial services, right? Be it a bank account or whatever. And in 6 years, or by actually probably around 10 years, by 2016, this number had risen to 75%. So huge social outcomes. But also it was good for business, because as a result of this, they were able to reach 51 million more customers. They were able to spread across 10 more countries. And every year, M-Pesa transacts more than $314 billion in yearly transactions, right? So it really helped to grow business. It helped Vodafone to roll out this service internationally. So again, a huge business angle to it, right? So as you can see in each of these examples, while the initiatives were creating social good, they were also beneficial to the business in terms of growth, revenue generation, cost cutting, as we saw, or expansion. And of course, the intangible benefits of doing so as well: better reputation, more goodwill, a socially responsible image for the company, and so on. So just to close off this section, I want to just, give you a quote by Bill Gates, who said this at the World Economic Forum in Davos a few years back. And he said, "I hope corporations will dedicate a percentage of their top innovators' time to issues that could help people left out of the global economy. And this kind of contribution is even more powerful than giving cash or offering employees time off to volunteer." And this is the difference with CSR again, because the best brains are coming together and solving problems. So it is a focused use of what your company does best. It is a great form of creative capitalism because it takes the brain power and makes life better for the richest while dedicating some of it to improving the lives of everyone else. And that's the beauty of social entrepreneurship. Okay, great. I'm wondering if we could just take a quick pause here again before I move and shift the spotlight on you and how you, as part of corporates, can drive social innovation in your own company. So maybe I can just quickly pause and see if there are any questions or any thoughts. And if not, I can just move on and we can just take questions right at the end.
I think there's a question from Ms.
Yeah.
Nitin Anshul. Can I go ahead with that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, there's a question from Mr. Nitin Dakre, and his question is how we can initiate this within our industry on a country level. And presently, is there any challenge working as an entrepreneur? Thank you, Nitin.
Thanks, Nitin. So the challenges, and we're going to talk about the challenges in this section in particular, but the challenges could be very specific to your organization, right? So you have to, if you have an idea that you would like to take forward, obviously you have to garner internal support. You have to see the structure of your own organization. So I wouldn't say that there are challenges as a whole or just one challenge that affects everyone, but it really depends from organization to organization. But there are certain ways that you can put together this idea that helps you to overcome those challenges and also get support from internal management. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this next section.
Okay, there's other question from Mr. Satyapal Anshul.
Okay.
And his question is, do you know any proven ideas in which energy is available to common people at very cheap rates? Thank you, Satyapal. Energy.
Okay, an idea of social entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think so. But I think his question is specifically related to energy being available to common people at very cheap rates. If some social entrepreneur has done some work on that.
Yes, I definitely know of social entrepreneurs who've done a lot of work to make energy accessible. I have to think about a social entrepreneurship example to make sure how this was kind of initiated within organizations. But I can definitely share about social entrepreneurs, if that helps.
Sure.
Yeah, so would you like me to do that now, or can I just share this after the session?
I mean, maybe we can go ahead and we can do that at later stage, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, because if what I can do is that even after the session, I can actually send through some specific to the energy sector, because there are a lot of Ashoka fellows, a lot of entrepreneurs that I know who have worked in the energy space and who are bringing cheap energy to people who are living, either off grid or in the poorest parts of the developing world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, okay. So moving back to social innovation or social entrepreneurship, right? So how can you drive social innovation in your company? So let's say you have a great idea and an idea that can contribute to social good, and it also makes business sense for your company. So how can you go about building a case for it within your company, and how can you convince your organization to give it a shot, right? I mean, that's really the biggest sort of challenge, because you have your day job, you are responsible for a certain objectives that you have to pursue. So how do you go about taking on a new initiative and convincing your management to give it a shot, right? So the first thing that you have to do is that you have to build a solid business opportunity around it, right? So you have to build an absolutely strong and watertight business case. Because let's be honest, it won't be possible to convince an organization to put their funds and resources and take on risks for a new initiative that does not have any potential to impact the business, right? No matter how socially impactful it is, right? Because if it is just socially impactful, you will probably be asked to speak with the CSR team, right? And that is different from social entrepreneurship. So to be a social entrepreneur, to drive an innovation within your company, you need to come up with a very strong business case for it, right? And secondly, what you need is that you need to garner senior management support. So since you all work in organizations, and if you want to launch something new which will take up resources of the organization, you need the support of top level executives, right? You need to go up with them with a solid business plan, including maybe milestones and risk mapping of sorts and outcome projections, and you have to get their support in order to get started. And thirdly, you need to find cause alignment. And so what I mean by that is, what is the social objective you're pursuing and how is it aligned with your company's business objective? Because you don't want to choose something which is completely unrelated. And as you'd seen the examples I gave, the social cause was an extension of the business itself, right? So in the case of Allianz, if you remember, micro insurance for the poor, it is an insurance company, and they were extending it to the poor and to those who were at the bottom of the pyramid, right? Vodafone's M-Pesa, using mobile phones to promote financial inclusiveness for those who had been traditionally excluded. Lifebuoy, hand wash saves lives. The more you spread the benefits of hand wash, the more people buy Lifebuoy, right? So you can see how social impact is proportional to the business impact. The more you influence people to wash hands, the more behavioral change, the more you insure the poor, the more insurance business increases. So what I'm trying to say is that the social cause should be ideally intrinsically linked with the business to make a strong case for the idea that you have, right? But, and there is always a big but, right? Because it's definitely not easy. Because as part of an organization, there are various challenges that will stand in your way, right? Which are separate from what I've just discussed. There'll be office politics, there'll be bureaucracy, there'll be limited resources that can come your way, unsupportive colleagues, just to name a few. Why do you want to do this, right? Why do you want to pursue something that absolutely has no effect or impact on your bottom line of your business, right? So you wanted to create a new initiative, but then you will get rated poorly on your own business. So why do you want to do that? And in large organizations, typically, senior managers are not really judging ideas solely on the basis of their potential. Unfortunately, they are looking for evidence, right? They want track record, because again, and I'm reinforcing and stressing on this quite a bit, because organizational resources, funding, and risk is going to be taken by the organization, right? So they want to see some evidence, a bit more meat to the idea before they say, okay, go ahead and do that. So how can you get around this problem, right? How can you convince them that what your idea actually has legs, right? So one way to do that is to basically go lean. And what I mean by that is, and it's possibly a methodology that you all might have heard of. It's called the lean startup methodology, or the lean startup approach. And this was pioneered by Eric Ries, and it's become quite a successful norm for how to kickstart and run a startup, right? How to build a startup. And what it basically means is that when you want to launch something, instead of making a business plan and perfecting your product before you take it to market, you engage in what are called feedback loops, right? So you basically start with your hypothesis. And what you do is you build a minimum viable product, which is a very toned down and a bare bones version of the product you want to launch. You then go out to your potential customer and you test the product and get feedback from them, right? And with that feedback, you iterate your hypothesis, you improve on your product, and then you keep testing this way again and again and again. And the idea is to do it quickly and repetitively so that you finally build a product that is tested and it's ready to be launched into the market. So one big advantage of this process is that it eliminates wastage of time and resources, right? You don't want to spend a year trying to make something, and then when you launch it later, you realize nobody wants it, right? All those resources would have absolutely gone to waste. So this iterative process, it basically reinforces a build, measure, learn loop, which helps to eliminate waste, and which is again a big concern for management when they evaluate new projects. So as a social entrepreneur, you can apply the same methodology to your idea as well. So you can start with your hypothesis, you can test it, and using that feedback, you can improve this, and you can do this again and again iteratively until you arrive at a point where you have some amount of evidence to back up your idea with results, right? And that is what management wants to see, evidence and results, right, before they back it up, and that too with minimal wastage, as I said. So that is how you go lean. And again, there is no right or wrong way for doing this. And I'm going to share with you very quickly another strategy that could also work as you navigate your way through your organization. So what I shared with you earlier, in a way, was like an over the radar strategy, right? You share your idea and you get management support and you get going. But this strategy also has some risks, because if you get a no early on, there are very less chances that it will become a yes later, right? Even if you come back later with evidence. And there is, I think it's called the confirmation bias, which basically means that, once you get a no, it kind of stays as a no, because senior managers don't want to look like they are flip-flopping or they're dilly-dallying over this, right? So if you get a no from a CEO, very unlikely you'll get a yes later, right? So while this strategy, the over-the-radar strategy, it gives you access to company resources, it also puts you under this sort of a ticking sort of a time bomb as well, because it puts the spotlight immediately on you, right? So let's say you get that yes, which is quite difficult to get right away to begin with, but you get that yes. And the moment you get that yes, you will get your resources, but you will also immediately come under the spotlight, which can put a lot of pressure to make it succeed. So there is another strategy that sometimes works, and it's quite the opposite of this above the radar strategy, and it is called stealth innovation or under the radar innovation, which is basically developing the idea as a product or as a first, accumulating evidence. You gain your allies within the organization, and only then you take it to top executives to get their approval, right? And the advantages of this approach are that you get the time to develop that proof of concept, right? You get the time to collect evidence and to demonstrate track record before you approach management, right? And they are looking for some sort of validation or some sort of evidence. And so this helps you to go and collect, gives you the time to be able to do that. And secondly, you avoid confirmation bias, right? You increase your chances of getting a yes by delaying that decision. And thirdly, you avoid the risk and pressure that comes with early exposure. So no spotlights on you, no eyes on you, no constant reviews. And so, by really starting a project in stealth mode, you can postpone the moment that the clock starts ticking for your idea. So this is called stealth innovation, or innovating under the radar. And now, while stealth innovation and it's a very important point that I want to make over here, said while stealth innovation involves not going to the top executives too early, it doesn't dispute the importance of allies. In fact, it's one of the key features of stealth innovation where you build a team of allies, which is called stealth sponsors, right? And what it means is that instead of going to your CEO, CFO, or anybody in the top management, you approach managers who are just a notch or two above you, right? So they might not have a lot of power, but they definitely have enough to get you going, and they can better understand your incentives. Of course, you have to pick very wisely, people who understand what you're doing and can support you. And the another advantage is that if you meet someone who's resistant, it's not the end of the world. Because if, let's say, you approach a CEO and the CEO says, no, that's it, right? There's no more CEOs that you can speak with. Whereas in this case, there's more than one people that you can speak with. So if you get resistance from one, you can always move on to somebody else who might be ready to support you. So you get a group of these allies to support and advise and give feedback, and also perhaps give spare resources if they have it. And then these allies become your biggest advocates once you're ready to present to top management. And a very quick example of this under the radar strategy. So this was in Pfizer, in their New York office, and the entrepreneur who started this Pfizer Works was this gentleman by the name Jordan Cohen. And he started a productivity tool to allow employees to outsource all the grunt work, right? So that they could focus their time on work that was of high quality or on important tasks. And it would also allow Pfizer to make better use of its highly skilled and highly paid staff as well. So this was launched in 2008, and it quickly became the most sought after service that Pfizer was offering. And even though people had to pay for this out of their own budget, it was still their most popular service offering. But the interesting thing is that he didn't bring this idea out right in the beginning. In fact, he stayed under the radar for more than a year, collecting evidence and gaining allies. And once he had that evidence and he had that group of allies and ambassadors, he took it to senior management and he got an immediate approval for it. And not only that, he got the budget and he was also made the head of Pfizer Works. So again, depending on your organization, your idea, your circumstances, there is no right or wrong way. You have to choose which strategy works best for you, right? You can go over the radar, and while that may bring you resources and it may give you funding, but it also increases the chances of the no that I talked about. And it also puts immediate spotlight on you. Or you can go under the radar, and it increases your chances of getting a yes by giving you the time to build your proof of concept and getting evidence and allies in place. But because you're under the radar, you have to figure out how you're going to manage the resources to do all of that, right? You have to figure out where you're going to take out the time to develop such an initiative, because without compromising on your day job. So you literally have to see what works best for you. So that's that on the section on ways that you can initiate social innovations within your organization. And again, I'm going to take a quick pause before we move on to the last section, which is a very quick section, but it talks about how corporates can collaborate with the social sector to increase, to basically deliver large-scale impact. So we'll move on to that in just about a minute. And if anyone has any comments or questions, please feel free to share.
There's one question from Mr. Shivkumar Rai, Anshul.
Yeah.
And his question is it a good idea to get a partner to test your MVP?
Yes, absolutely. You have to get those allies. And by partner, I assume you mean somebody in your organization. And if that's the case, or even outside for that matter, because it's ultimately about collecting evidence and collecting feedback, right? So if you have somebody who can do that with you and collect evidence, and of course, later on become your ally and your advocate when you go and speak with senior management, of course, it's always better. Okay, so moving on to the last part, and I'm going to run through this very quickly. So collaborating with the social sector. So now, so far we have talked about social entrepreneurship or the need for social innovation within corporates and how people who work in those organizations can drive that, right? And in this section, I want to share with you why should corporates collaborate with the social sector, right? Or why should social entrepreneurs who are working within companies join hands with social entrepreneurs who are driving innovative solutions outside those companies? So what is the need for corporates to collaborate with the social sector? Because together they can solve large scale problems that they can't on their own, right? Each of these groups has their own strengths and benefits, right? They have their own strengths, but the power of such partnerships, which brings the entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurs together, the power of this partnership lies in their complementary strengths, right? So corporates, what do they offer? Corporates offer scale because of their size and their reach. They have resources at their disposal, which social entrepreneurs don't have, right? They have functional and operational expertise, given that there are large teams and this can be utilized. And of course, they have more funds, which honestly, social enterprises are always striving hard to raise. On the other hand, social entrepreneurs offer a deep understanding of social problems and why they exist, right? They have this understanding which corporates will not have because of the work that these social entrepreneurs do with the communities, with people who are at the bottom of the pyramid. And because of that understanding, they develop innovative solutions to tackle these problems, tackle the problems that people in the developing world, that people in the bottom of the pyramid are facing. And they develop strong social networks within the communities, right? And the value of these strong networks is that these communities, and we all know this very well, that if you ever go to a village in India or any rural area, the communities are typically bound by very strong cultural and social norms which are very difficult to break into. And this often serves as one of the biggest hurdles when dealing with these communities. Even if you take to them a product or a service which is actually really good for them, they might just shut their doors at you, right? Because they are bound by such cultural norms. So it's very difficult to break in. And social entrepreneurs, because of the years that they spend understanding these communities, the years that they spend understanding their social problems that these communities face, they're able to break into those mindsets and break into those communities and generate that sense of trust, right? So when you combine the strengths of these two sides, that is the commercial and the social world, the solutions that come about and the impact you see is far greater than what they could have ever individually achieved. Now, take the case of Muhammad Yunus, whom we talked about right at the beginning. And he founded Grameen Bank in 1983, and it was in 2006 that he got the Nobel Prize, so after 23 years. And in that much period, Grameen Bank had about 7 million customers. And you compare that to the impact of M-Pesa, which was backed by Vodafone, which just after 1 year had 1 million customers. Within 8 years, they were at 17 million. And now they are at over 50 million customers. So that's the power of scale that comes through when you have the backing of a corporate. So just joining hands can help create so much social change at scale, which individually neither corporates nor social enterprises can do. And as you can see on the slide, a multinational with billions of dollars at its disposal and on its balance sheet can create far more impact than 10,000 social ventures together. So it's just so critical for corporates to join hands with social enterprises towards solving some of the biggest challenges that we are seeing in the world today. And not only is it good, again, for the world, it's also good for the business. And why is that? Because the bottom of the pyramid market, which I've been talking about, which is basically more than 4 billion people that are living in abject poverty today, or in other words, their earning power is less than approximately $4 a day. But from an economic value perspective, this market is valued at more than $5 trillion. And it largely remains untapped. And that is because large corporations, for one, don't know how to access them, right? They have no idea how to penetrate those communities, that bottom of the pyramid market. And two, they're not even built to serve it. Their solutions, their products, their services, their processes and systems are not built to serve this market. And it is a wasted potential, right? And that is where collaborating with social enterprises is critical, because social entrepreneurs have built those connections and solutions for the bottom of the pyramid. And they can they have developed a deep understanding. They have developed the network. They have developed the understanding of the communities and the trust with the communities. And when they offer these, strong and valuable networks to the corporates, it becomes a win-win solution. So just consider the housing industry as an example. So currently, 1/6 of the world's population lives in slums and in what we call squatter cities, right? That's 1 billion people who don't have access to formal housing. And if you put yourself in the shoes of, let's say, a developer or a tile maker or cement manufacturer, whatever it is, or even a bank that provides mortgages, just think what it would mean for your business if you could access this market, right? It's $1 trillion housing market opportunity, and till now, uh, these kind of organizations have not been able to access this market because they don't have the know-how, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the access. But social enterprises or social entrepreneurs who've been working with this segment, who've been working on solutions on how to get these people into a part of the formal housing market, how to get people who are living in slums access to housing or access to mortgage, which has been previously unavailable, or even act as aggregators, because again, they have trust with the community, how to act as aggregators of these people and bring them in front of potential customers or developers. So there's a huge potential in these kind of collaborations, even from a business perspective, right? There's a $3.6 trillion market for agricultural products, right, or food products, and similarly for healthcare, energy, and education. And all this can be unleashed only through collaboration, where both the sides bring, their strengths. One in provision of scale, resources, funding, expertise, and the other in terms of the solutions that they've come up for the poor, the access that they have, and the knowledge and networks that they've built, right? So working together, corporations, social entrepreneurs can really reshape industries and solve the biggest problems that we're seeing in the world today. And again, who drives? So it's a win-win for all, of course. Together we win. We solve social challenges, and it's also good for the business. And then the person who drives this in corporates is, of course, our topic for the day, which is the social entrepreneur. So that's it from me. I wanted to give one more example of, one of the ventures that I'm working with. It's a good example for social entrepreneurship, but I think we are running short on time. So I'm just going to open this up for questions and any thoughts or any experience that somebody might have in case you've pursued it yourself.
Thank you so much, Anshul. I think let me start with one or two questions, right?
Okay.
When based, I think what somebody is asking there. I think in India, what we have seen, and maybe I'm sure you also would have heard about, I think two very interesting I would say experiment that continue to do very well. I think one is the ITCC Chopal right now. What it started as an auctioning kind of thing. Of course it started as a solutioning exercise, but now I think it has grown to be what is called as a brick and click kiosk. What they call as the sanchalaks, right, in all these rural areas, and basically they can get all the information on a click of a button, especially weather, the commodity prices and things like that, which I think is definitely empowered these rural people, because all of the while, they were at the mercy of the so-called middlemen. They are the ones who used to take the produce and then, give them a very peanut prices and then, make a lot of, margins there. But because of this empowerment tool that ITC has come out with, what is called as e-Chopal, so along with everybody else, the mandis, as you call, right, where they used to auction, but it also is to participate. Only thing is, it is to give them a much higher rate. So therefore, people found this one to be absolutely interesting. Of course, like you rightly said, there is the commercial benefit to that is, it is able to get secured. I mean, what is it? I would say not. I won't say guaranteed, but definitely different produce at the different price at the different region. So it solved many problems internally also for IT. So therefore, even today as we are talking, although it was launched almost 20 years plus, but even today it is growing tremendously. That's one. Other one big piece that I know for sure, I mean, you would have heard, every one of our participants also must have heard, is the Hindustan Unilever Limited's what is called as a Project Shakti, the SAG. And it was the way they have collaborated with what is called as the self-help groups, HHCs as you call them, right? And then they've involved them. Therefore, again, it was a very big initiative of empowering rural women. So therefore, they get empowered in terms of having their economic economic independence, right?
Yeah.
And they could make money, and then there's to be one team leader, and she used to go around the last mile. It's a
Yeah.
tremendous. I think in the process they have developed some very very innovative, probably world's one of the most innovative last mile distribution channel that they've created. Unbelievable it was, and even today it works because they saw it's like what Sikar Prahlad has talked about is a co-creation. So they're able to co-create value for the last mile thing. I think that's something that we have seen in India, of course, in many, of course. We've also seen some sort of, I think, a social entrepreneur in one sense. I think Godrej has done some very good work, or a very innovative thing called as a Chotu Cool. You would have seen very small refrigerator, you would have seen it. But again, that has come because, when somebody is visiting the rural areas, they found that they're getting wasted. And therefore, but the only thing is they cannot afford, that's one, the affordability is one. Other one is the electricity is another problem. So keeping these two things in mind, they come out with this beautiful innovation, and again it does very well. But I think we do have some very interesting innovations, especially in the social entrepreneurship, but not many. But I'm sure in the years to come they should grow, and I thought I'll share with your permission.
Now, that is very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing. And you're absolutely right. We are seeing a lot of this coming up now. The first example that you shared about cutting the middleman, so that, it's the farmers or the producers who get the right value. So more like farm to market. So you start with the farm itself, and then you give them access to market directly, right? So there are a lot of innovations that are coming about in that particular area as well, whether it is in India, we've seen a lot in Africa and South America, basically the developing parts of the world, where you know that the farmers are the ones who get oppressed and the margins are always made by the middlemen.
So there's a question from Mr. S.P. Rajan, and his question is: there is large scope for increasing the capacities of water bodies by cleaning and desilting these. This may increase the capacity by 50 to 70% of the present capacity levels. This is an area for CSR programs. I think there's more of a perspective, Anshul. But thank you so much, S.P. Rajan. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Good. And I think other question that we have is related to and I think one of the things that you talked about is that the what you call the social thing. I think somewhere I could write it down before I forget is the stealth sponsors, right? I think uh, uh, but what I think the stealth sponsors again, you also talked about, the some of the challenges that institutions or companies might face. I think the first ones I talked about is definitely the office politics itself, then the mindset and things like that. Now, to overcome that, what kind of specific things do you think, especially entrepreneurs should do? Because entrepreneurs normally think that they have a winning formula and they get onto the bandwagon and they are in the chase to make that quick bucks. Of course, in India, what we have seen is that I think the chase has always been, at least for most of them, if not for all of them, has been to be in the unicorn, league of unicorns. But then, if you have to do this social entrepreneurship at a very early stage, so that it really benefits them, so therefore they don't get stuck with the model as such, right? Because that's continues evolve. So, did you ever come across some sort of social entrepreneurship initiative at a startup level companies, Anshul?
Yeah, and I think that is where things are gradually moving. But yes, of course, I mean, what we see that's coming out in media, obviously, that's what attracts more attention as well, right? It's the unicorns and those who are getting backed by a lot of VCs and all of that. But definitely, a lot of businesses we see now are already incorporating social missions into their
Right.
business mission. So they are, so as I mentioned earlier, that they are, because that is what the future of the world is going to be any which way. So you can't ignore that angle at all, right? And with all the ESG factors coming in place, I think a lot of them are realizing that right from the moment they get started, they need to have that social mindset. Whether they start social projects right away or not is a different thing, because again, you need to be at a certain stage where you start these kind of projects as well. But apart from that, the kind of mindset to be able to be socially responsible, so that you are positively contributing to the environment, you are creating change, you are even supporting your own employees and you are making a positive contribution to the society. This is a change that we are seeing in the mindset happening even in the business world. But
Very good.
there's lots more to be done, of course.
Absolutely. I think we'll have one more question for the day. I think, of course, there's a beautiful comment by Ashmuk Panchal. And it's more of a, I think, feedback to you, Anshul. He's saying it is very much informative and I got delighted. Thanks so much. Thank you, Ashmuk. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Anshul, for that. I think last question for the evening is that what we get to see in terms of social entrepreneurship initiatives, right? I think one of the things that we get to see is that sometimes the company, the government also gives a lot of encouragement. At least in India
Yeah,
case, I think they do
yeah,
give a lot of
yeah.
encouragement. But the question that we always get is that. For example, let's say you look at something like, I'm sure in your illustrious experience, you would have heard about this beautiful company called as Fab India. That is the sky. I would say in a
Mm.
hash during his Harvard Business School days, and as a business model was there, and then therefore it's a beautiful model ultimately, right? The fact, but the only thing is that what we got to see is that in the early 2000s, right? I remember 2002, 2003, 4 kind of around time. It is all over the place, right? Everybody loved it. Everybody wants to go and shop around it and things like that. But
Mm.
now, as we're talking, I get to see them definitely in airports, most of the airports, most of the Indian airports, at least the metro ones, you'll find it because of the kinds of that's the kind of clientele they expect. That's one.
Yeah,
The second thing is that definitely it is in the tier one and including metros and the tier one cities it is
yeah.
available. But what we got to see is that. I think somewhere I don't say that it lost the steam, but then I think it became stuck with this old model, and therefore the scalability became an issue for this venture, right? So therefore, what would be your comment as far as scaling such social intrapreneurship? Of course, right now, I won't say it is a clear example of social intrapreneurship. It is definitely a social entrepreneurship kind of thing. But nevertheless, even within them, I think maybe do you think they could have started some social intrapreneurship initiative within Fab India so that they could have scaled even higher?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, ultimately, this is about innovation, right?
Yeah,
You need to be constantly innovative. You need to be constantly having a pulse on the market to see where it's going, right? And again, anything could have gone wrong. I mean, I'm not particularly talking about Fab India here, but anything could have gone wrong. It could have been the where they were selling, or it could be the price point, or what sort of clientele they wanted to reach to. So based on what the market is telling you, you need to be constantly innovating. And I am not sure whether they were really just innovating, because what also happened was that while they were doing that, they were pretty much the first ones to launch that sort of an organization. But then
great.
there were more that came, right? So were they able to innovate beyond what they were earlier offering? So it's not just about social entrepreneurship in this case, but I think it's about that constant innovation to see which direction you want to take based on the kind of feedback that you're getting from the market.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
and again, it might not be an example of social entrepreneurship in particular, but it could be more about a sustainable business, right? Which is what I was saying when I was answering your startup question. So organizations like Lego, IKEA, organizations like Fab India, as you just said, they are bringing sustainability into their processes, right? So even though it might not be a social entrepreneurship project, but that's their core DNA any which ways to
Right,
operate sustainably. Right.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Anshul, for your time. And I think we transgress your time. I think it's now. I think must be 10 past some time in Singapore. But thank you so much for your time. And
Yeah.
really, very very exciting topic because I think there's so much to ask. There's so much to learn from it. I think. People look, get stuck with this idea of social, but then not the entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah.
But I think what
Or
it,
entrepreneurship, but not social.
yeah,
So
I know.
yeah, yeah.
If I may connect the dots with what Prahlad has talked about in that book, bottom of the pyramid, right? And
Mm.
I think till the time he talked about, I'm sure everybody knew about it, but I think till the time he talked about it, I think
Mm.
people didn't know that there is a market, sizable market or addressable market, as you call it,
Yeah.
at that level. I think your P&Gs of the world or Gillett's of the world, I think they started manufacturing exclusively for that
Yeah.
market. I think so I'm sure in the case of social entrepreneurship as well. I think it is to the benefit of all the companies that they can start looking at this angle.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting thing that you just said, because earlier what was happening was that when these large organizations were wanting to get into developing markets, they were
Mm,
just pushing the developed market products down, right? Maybe at a different price point, or
absolutely.
with a little bit of changes here and there. And ultimately they realize that's not going to work. They need to first understand what are the needs of people in the developing markets and innovate over there. In fact, organizations like GE and a couple of others have successfully done what is called reverse innovation, which
Exactly.
is innovating for the developing world and then taking that innovation to developing markets. right? To
I think the
create new
best
business.
example that we have seen is a kurkure. I think it's actually born out of Hyderabad. The recipe was born out of working mother. Actually, she's a working mother, and she this Pepsi guys have got into it, and phenomenal. It's a nice story. But then now they, like you rightly said, reverse innovation is that they start taking these products from what is originated, what is developed here to the rest of the
Yeah.
world. Maybe to
Yes.
start with the similar markets, but then even to developed countries also they're doing it. But absolutely bang on there. But thank you so much, Anshul, for
My
your time,
pleasure.
and
Thank
I look
thank you
forward
so
to having.
much. Yeah,
Absolute
thank you so
pleasure.
much, Dr. Nagin. The rest of the TimesPro team as well. Really, thank you for having me here.
Thank
And
you so
thanks
much.
everyone for joining as well.
Thank you so much. Look forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.